Blockbuster trades and who's a contender for real? It's time to squad.
You are talking puck with the NHL Squad Show, sponsored by Game Time. From the Oilers to the Stars, Golden Knights, and the Panthers, the Rangers, Avalanche, and yes, even the Maple Leafs. The Locked On Podcast Network brings together all its local experts to provide the scoops, breakdowns, and comprehensive looks at all the NHL, with plenty of trash talk to go with it. Don't miss the hard hits and glove-dropping hot takes on the Locked On NHL Squad Show. It's time to drop the puck.
And welcome, everybody, to the NHL Squad. Sit back, grab your favorite beverage, and join us as we get you ready for another wild week across the NHL. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. I'm Gil Martin from Locked On Islanders, and I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel here today. Seth Toupal from Locked On Wild, Chris Micieli of Locked On Avalanche, Eddie Garcia of Locked On LA Kings, and Ann Kimmel of Locked On Predators. And, let's start off with the big blockbuster news from the weekend. Chris, I know you're not thrilled about this, but Mikko Rantanen is now a member of the Carolina Hurricanes. Chris, let's start with you. Your thoughts on this deal?
Oh, wow. So I guess the first thing is it definitely was surprising. Was it an option? I think maybe in the back of everybody's head, sure. And Kyle, my co-host, and I even threw that out there. Like the front office wouldn't be doing their job if they didn't at least entertain some sort of trade for Mikko Rantanen. My thought was all along, they're the best version of the Avalanche with him. So why would they go trade him during the season? Their best chance to win a Stanley Cup is with him. So you run that gauntlet, and if it works out, you look great. And if it doesn't work out, then you go into the offseason and try to make a deal. It seems like recently they got to a point where they figured, nope, we're going to move on. And now you're hearing like the number that he would have agreed to, or I shouldn't say he would have agreed to, that they were at, which is like 11.75. And you hear that he wanted like 14. That I think is true. And I think what the Avalanche wanted to offer him is true in 11.75. But I think I just get a feeling that they pulled back on that and said, we need to think more for the future. And the future. So I think the question I want to ask everybody here is, the question I think the Avalanche had to ask within themselves, among many questions at this game, within this thing, is who would you rather have, Mikko Rantanen or Cale Makar? And as difficult of a question as that is to answer, I think that's what they were stuck with, because Cale Makar is going to get his money too. So if you give Mikko Rantanen his money, Nathan MacKinnon already has his money. And if you give Cale Makar his money, you are really hamstringing your team for middle positions, depth positions. And I really think when the Avalanche took a step back, looked at the big picture, they said, as much as we don't want to do this, it might be in the best interest of our team long term to do it and do it now so we can get something for him. And I think that's the route they went. Maybe I'm crazy, but I can answer that question very quickly. I'm taking Cale Makar, and I love Mikko Rantanen. I love Mikko Rantanen, but Cale Makar is one of the most unique players in all the NHL. With what he can do, there's only a couple other guys that are even in the conversation. So, as much as I like Mikko, I'm definitely taking Cale Makar. But the Avalanche, I think, are certainly a contender before this trade, and I'm not saying they're off the board now, but I think, for me personally, I could never let an asset like that walk at the end of the year and say, we're going to take our chances and try and win a cup this year, because only one team can win the cup. And it's hard, obviously. And you know that he was a part of a cup winner, but I just can't. And if they're that far apart, as you said, I cannot let him walk for nothing. I can't lose that guy for nothing, even if it means it takes away from my team and my chances this year. So if they were really that far apart, I think Colorado had to swallow hard, and I think they did the right thing, as hard as that was.
I will say this, just as somebody who covers Steven Stamkos now, in the quiet of the night at like 3 a.m. in the dark, Steven Stamkos is probably whispering to Rantanen, take less money and stay.
Well, and he said you're hearing now that he's telling outlets that he would have taken less. So my response to that is like, okay, well then you either need to hire a new agent, maybe that didn't get across to him, or it goes back to the Avalanche side of things saying like, it's just down the road. We're just going to be paying so much money to 3 guys. And I think that's really what it can, because even Chris McFarland, and he had a press conference, he even said flat out, we're not deep enough. We are not deep enough to go through the gauntlet of a playoff. I really wonder how the depth guys on the team took that. They probably didn't like that comment too much, but he is right. They're good in their depth. They're not playoff good. And this is not it. You're not going to trade Mikko Rantanen and this is your return. And then you stop and say like, oh, we're just going to go forward with this. There's more going to happen. I think they wanted to do this before the Four Nations tournament because God forbid he gets hurt in the Four Nations tournament, then you cannot trade him at all. So they did it before then, and we'll see what happens from the Four Nations through the trade deadline. But no, they're not done. It's split down the middle in the Avs fan base of liking this and not liking this. And you had fans that wanted this to happen for this very reason, opens up some assets, and other people are just like what Eddie was saying. It's Mikko Rantanen. Like, how do you get rid of a guy like that? But it's a business. Numbers are what the numbers are. There's a salary cap, and you can't avoid that aspect of it.
Yeah, I guess that was my initial thought on this whole deal is what's next? What does Colorado do to piggyback off of this? Because like you said, Chris, if they do this and that's it, that's not going to do it. But if they do this and this allows them to fill out the bottom of the lineup or go get somebody else, then you start to see why this happened. And this reminds me a little bit, obviously it's on a much higher scale, but this reminds me of kind of what the Wild went through with Kevin Fiala a few years ago, where it's pretty clear that the Wild just were not going to be able to pay Fiala what he was looking for due to their current cap constraints. Obviously, they moved him in the offseason, but at a certain point, if you aren't going to be able to fit a player in, you either have to look at that roster that you have and say, is it worth keeping these guys over this player? Or what can we get so we don't let this guy walk for nothing?
You know, the one thing that really surprised me about this, other than obviously a great player going somewhere, was when it happened. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if Carolina played a role in this by saying, we're going to roll out the red carpet for Mikko Rantanen. We're going to sell him like we've never sold anybody before, because it's very rare a superstar elite player is coming to Carolina and we've got a chance to sign him. I wonder if we're going to sell so hard, and if he doesn't give us a good indication by the time the trade deadline comes around that he wants to re-sign here, maybe they flip him somewhere else.
Whoa.
So that's, I mean, because they can't let him go for nothing, right? I mean, so, and I know they had Jake Gensel last year and he decided, man, I didn't want to stay, whatever the reasons were for that. They've tried this before. I know they want a star player desperately in that market, but I just thought this is done so early. What could be behind that? That would be amazing if that would happen down the line. But we'll see if Mikko, they're going to do everything they can to say, please resign with us, because that's what makes it work for Carolina, right? If they don't resign him at the end of the year, or if he doesn't want to stay there, then obviously they're kind of left holding the bag too.
It would be a very expensive rental. And now Sebastian Aho gets his second job, salesman, because he's probably in charge of trying to convince Rantanen to stay. And well, Chris, let me ask you one more thing real quick. What does this trade say about the Avs contention window?
They will look at it as they don't feel like it will change that much. I think it might be difficult sell on some people when you lose someone like Mikko Rantanen, but they're going to put themselves in the position. Martin Necas is no scrub, right? Like, he's a very good player, but I think the headline here is losing someone like Mikko Rantanen. but I really like what Nishis brings in for the Avalanche style of play. So I think you're going to drop a little bit. It's going to happen. Like, are you, the whole question of, are you as good of a team? No, but you're not a bad team. You're not like a non-playoff team all of a sudden. So no, they're still going to go for it. And like Seth was wondering, like, what else do they have up their sleeve? I think if they do make some really timely and smart moves to kind of even out their time on ice for their top line is ridiculous. Like, they are playing their top guys 24 minutes a night, not the defensemen, your forwards. So they want to even that out and make it more of, rolling 4-line type of team, because that's what beat them last year with Dallas. And you have to replicate that. And again, I think they just finally came to the mindset of like, yeah, it is the worst thing to lose someone like him, but does it give us the momentum going forward if we make more moves to be more like a team like Dallas? They think it does. So as far as a window, no, I don't feel like in the front office is thinking like this is closing that window for us.
All right, it's going to be interesting. Lots more, I'm sure, that we'll hear from the Avalanche between now and the trade deadline. A lot of other trades likely to take place as well. We'll talk about some of the blockbusters we might want to see. All that and more coming up on this episode of the NHL Squad. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you could place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. So more trades are definitely coming between now and the trade deadline. And I wonder if we see a flurry right before Four Nations, because as somebody said earlier, if somebody gets hurt at Four Nations, their trade value goes down to zero. And I know this is a concern for the Islanders with Brock Nelson. I'm sure it's a concern for a lot of other teams. Heard some rumors today, read some rumors that Brad Marchand may be available from Boston. Any thoughts about that?
Well, at the moment, I think I could see them looking into it, but they are holding a playoff spot at the moment. So I don't think they're looking to move him while that happens. If the floor drops out here from him and they fall out of a playoff spot in the next few weeks, maybe, yeah. But at the moment, I think I don't see that happening right now.
I mean, the Avalanche are in a playoff spot, and they just traded Mikko Rantanen. So. But I know what you're saying. Yeah,
True.
No, it's a good point.
With as much as a desolate minefield as the Eastern Conference wildcard picture is going to be, the fact that all three New York teams who have had crisis-level seasons are still in the chase, it would take a massive free fall for anybody to, especially Boston, to be looking at dealing any of their stars. Like, they're going to have to be really bad. Now, they've already done that, so they just have to do it again, and then you never know.
I will say this, all it takes is one phone call. And there is not a GM doing their job that's not answering every call that comes in. And all you need is one. All you need is one phone call. You know, we're watching in Nashville, we watch Barry Trotz on the phone. Every time he's on the phone, somebody's reporting Barry Trotz is at practice on the phone. All you need is one phone call. And It does seem odd that you would trade somebody when you are in playoff contention. I imagine. I don't
Especially
know.
somebody like that, though, too, right?
Yeah.
Somebody like
Goal
that.
guy.
Yeah, like that's I mean, that is more than just moving a player. And I think about this with Rantanen. It's almost more than moving a player. It's kind of, there's a statement to it. I don't think the statement is nearly as desperate in Colorado as it would be in Boston if you move Marchand. But there's a statement to that.
I mean, I was pretty sold on Rantanen finishing off the season for the Avs. So now that didn't happen, I'll never say that again. I think anything is always on the table for any team. I think Ann's 100% right with the just takes one call, because if it wasn't, at least, with the Rantanen thing, if it wasn't Carolina, I don't know you're not hearing that there was any other team really in the mix here. And that the Avs were actively shopping him. I think it was just, it was good for both teams at the right time. That could be true for Boston. It's just one seller, one buyer, and you see what happens. But man, if you imagine those two guys go in the same trade window to different teams, it would just be kind of unfathomable to see both of those guys switching teams.
And meanwhile, everyone's reporting, Barry Trotz is on the phone and he's probably talking to his wife. A dozen eggs.
100%. But let me tell you, we're all like, what's he doing? What's he doing?
Pick up dog food,
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, let's see how it plays out. Are there any other? Well, let me ask this before we get into specific players. How does the fact that there are so many teams bunched together affect early trades? You got two things, I think, working in opposite directions. You got 4 nations, which will, I think, encourage early trades. And then the fact that almost nobody is really too far out of it, which will discourage some early trades. What do you guys think?
Feels like there's almost going to be 2 trade deadlines. The pre-4 nations, and then I think teams will see who is still standing after 4 nations and say, well, this is a player that is available. They didn't get hurt during the 4 nations. So now we can look at acquiring them and trying to add them to the midst. So it is crazy, though, because especially in the East, there's just so many teams that are still within striking distance. So if you're a GM and you're a team that's, on the bottom level of that, do you call off the dogs, or do you say, hey, it's wide open? Why would we not just continue to try to push at this? Like, it's different in the West where Chicago's not going to make the postseason. San Jose's not going to make the postseason. Like, those teams that were mathematically eliminated before the season started. So you can go into negotiations with those teams on trades because they're looking to next season already. But seems like everybody in the East, other than maybe like Buffalo, I don't know. I haven't checked to see how Buffalo's even doing lately. Maybe they're back in it. It seems like everybody in the East is pretty much still alive, other than Buffalo.
Yeah.
No, it's a good point.
I think it's going to be interesting to see which GM, swallows hard and says, yes, it would be great to be a wild card team, but we know that we're not a legitimate contender this year. And so we're going to do the smart thing and we are going to be sellers, right? A lot of other teams might stand pat. I might be afraid. Maybe if you're Columbus, right? It's been a feel-good story. You've got something positive going on in the organization. Let's make some moves and see what's going to happen. We're not probably Stanley Cup contenders, but let's have our fan base and our franchise have something to feel good about, especially after obviously what happened in the offseason and what all of our expectations were for them. Maybe if you're Detroit, and you're like, the Yzer plan has finally got to come up with something. We've fired our coach. We've made that move there. We need to do something to finally get back in a postseason spot, even if we don't really think we're contenders. So, maybe a Montreal says, you know what? Those guys all think they're in it. We're okay taking a step back. We're still rebuilding. Maybe we will take advantage of the situation. So I think it really depends on where your franchise is and kind of where they've been in the recent past too.
Absolutely. I think that's a big part of it. And, teams like Ottawa and Detroit probably need to show, hey, we're making progress. We've ended this long playoff drought. And then, teams like Columbus and Montreal may say, hey, we're still in a rebuilding phase right now. We're playing with house money. If we make the playoffs, great, but we're not going to jeopardize this rebuilding program in order to just, play 4 or 5 playoff games and call it a season.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm interested to see just like how the trade season like kind of shakes out in terms of, remember, I think it was a couple years ago, 2 years ago, everything was from like players were going from the West Coast to the East Coast. Like the East was just inheriting everybody. And then last year it was changed a little bit where more was going to the West Coast. Like, what is that dynamic going to be this year? It would
how
make
much
sense.
how much does the Rantanen trade change that? Right, people in the East, like New Jersey, we've got to do something to keep up with Carolina.
100%. And like we're saying, like there's kind of a log jam on the East Coast. How many of those teams on the lower end of that want to say like let's go for it, or how many are saying it's just too much there, and we're in the mix, but the teams that are at the top, we can't compete with them. And like you said, like it's a 4 or 5 game showcase and we're out. So do they want to put in the assets and picks and prospects and stuff like that to really make a go for it? Because I think that's what you're going to see. I think you're going to see a lot of stuff going to the East Coast again, because the West there's a lot more,
we're settled in the West.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting, no doubt about that. When we come back, we will talk a little bit more about some of the players that may be involved in some of these blockbuster deals and maybe some deals that we would like to see. All that and more next on The Squad. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Attending NFL playoff games is an unforgettable experience that brings fans together. I remember the excitement and energy of a playoff game that I attended recently, and I'm looking forward to making new memories this season. Well, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I recently used Game Time Picks to find tickets for an NFL playoff game. Browsing through the deals was simple. I found great value for all kinds of seats around the venue. The super deal was especially impressive, offering the best value for the event. The app's features like seat views before you buy and all-in pricing with no surprise fees at checkout made the experience smooth and reliable. Plus, the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee gave me peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So, guys, any other players you think that could surprise us and be involved in a big blockbuster as we get closer to either Four Nations or the trade deadline?
I mean, the Vancouver situation has to come to a head, right?
Please.
Oh my.
You would think.
Somehow.
Oh my.
And I'm not even necessarily talking Elias Pettersson or JT Miller. I'm looking at a guy like Brock Besser, who is in the final year of his deal. All of this drama between Miller and Pettersson and just the team in general, does that sway a guy like that to re-sign there? He's been linked to Minnesota for a long time, and not even necessarily just the Minnesota Wild, but elsewhere. Does that make somebody like that say, it'd sure be nice to go somewhere else where we're not having to deal with this on a daily basis? So maybe Vancouver says, we got to do something, and maybe Besser gets thrown into the trade winds here a little bit.
They've got to do something because the chemistry right now is not there.
It's a mess.
So
It's
yeah,
a hot
it is.
mess there. It is a hot mess. It is like 8th grade girl, middle school cafeteria. Like it really is. They have tried to kind of quell the rumors. I think it's become pretty obvious that it sounds irreparable, but I agree with you. You have to look around that locker room with players like Besser. You've got a lot of potential. This was a team that was pretty hot for a while, and man, you get something like that going in the locker room and it may make everybody else second guess, where do I want to be? They have got to clean that up. Like they have to clean that up yesterday.
Yeah, no, you're right. I don't know.
What about Thatcher Demko?
Oh,
does anybody want to trade for a guy who can't stay healthy, though? I mean, I know he's got a lot of potential. I like him,
desperate
but
for a goalie, right? I mean,
But why is it like outside of Vancouver, you don't like that seems like where the trade market is this year is just in Vancouver and really nothing else. Like who are the stars outside of that are the guys that people are going to be going after? It's always you're hearing Miller, Pettersson to a lesser extent, but like it's those guys. And outside of that, like, you know, Gil asked the question of like what are like kind of like the big name. Yeah, you hear Marchand, but I just wonder if that's just to spice things up. I really don't feel like that's going to happen. I don't know. Mikko came out of nowhere a little bit, and that's going to be the biggest deal. But outside of that, it's, you know, Miller's probably going to go. I'd have to think of him. But you usually have a list of guys that you are maybe could go, and not necessarily they do get traded, but there's just seems to be more names on the board of bigger names, and it doesn't seem to be that way this year.
You know, sorry, Ann. I floated just as kind of a like conspiracy theory a few weeks ago. Tage Thompson. And I have nothing to go off of with this. I just was tinfoil hatting this incredibly hard for selfish Minnesota Wild purposes. But think about it. A Buffalo team, Thompson has now had 2 different coaches. It's going in the wrong direction. How long is a guy like that going to want to be part of a franchise that has a clear track record of having stars say, I'm out? Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart, maybe Tage at some point. Maybe that's the next Vegas move. Maybe they go and they grab him. I don't know.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Really.
Put him there,
Yeah.
They'll find somebody.
They'll smack someone's kneecaps if they have to.
This is when I do my Heath Ledger Joker impression.
And what were you going to say?
I can't remember who the NHL insider was, but as this Rantanen deal was going down, says, but this isn't even the biggest deal that we heard rumors about. And I'm like, who is there? Like,
I know who it is. It's Sidney Crosby.
That's what it was.
Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, or the picture of the Pittsburgh skyline. And I'm like, what are the odds? I mean, like, really and truly.
That would make everyone's heads explode.
That Crosby is going to get traded? Come on.
I mean, it seems slim for sure, but who knows what that guy's thinking? I mean, he never lets anybody inside to what he really wants, and he would never let anyone know. That's just who he is, right? If he has a desire to say, I don't want to spend my final years of a Hall of Fame career, you know, Pittsburgh's been great to me, but we're not going anywhere. That team stinks. And if he wants to go and Pittsburgh can better themselves in the future, are Penguins fans really going to hate Sidney Crosby if he goes somewhere else to try and get another ring? No, I don't think they are. They still, Jaromir Jagr played for half the league. I know. Like, he has been
down.
It depends.
I don't know. They want to win in Pittsburgh, and they ain't winning with Sidney Crosby. They can lose with him, or they can lose without him.
I don't know.
As I'll relate it to the Islanders and John Tavares. It depends how it's done. You know, John Tavares said, "Oh yes, I want to stay. I want to re-sign," and then all of a sudden, there's a picture of a 9-year-old John Tavares in his pajamas, his Maple Leaf pajamas. Oh, he's out. He's signing with the Maple Leafs. I don't resent the fact that the guy wanted to sign with his childhood team. That's a dream come true. Go for it.
But how he did it.
The fact that he didn't tell the Islanders that he was going to do that and left them holding the bag where they got absolutely nothing for him, that's why fans boo him every time he comes back. Not that he's a bad guy, but that he just exited in a way that fans took as a slap in the face. I couldn't see Sidney Crosby doing that. But but that's, you know, he is Mr. Penguins. I mean, he's been the face of the franchise. There are people who don't remember Sidney Crosby not being on the Penguins who are big hockey fans. It would be a shakeup, to say the least.
I end every episode of Locked On Avalanche by saying that people are now 24 hours closer of Sidney Crosby becoming a Colorado Avalanche because it is so wanted.
His buddy's there. Yeah, his buddy's there.
if it happens at all, it better be in these colors behind me, because that's what everybody, at least in this side of the aisle, wants to see. That's where they want him to go. But I think Ann's right. Like, it'd be different because he's won cups. It's not like a Ray Bourque thing where he's, in the twilight of his career and he's got to go win one, so he goes to a great team. So I think they would be very upset, even though, hey, go chase one more. I think they would. I don't think they would really like it that much if he were to leave. I think they want him to be a lifer. I think there's something to be said about that in sports for, this day and age of playing your entire career with one team.
And I think that does mean something to him. I really do.
You're right. Yeah. I think 100% you're right. So I'd say it in a half joking manner to end our episodes, but I absolutely would love it, because that would just bring, those two guys.
Do you know how many of us in the West would not love that?
Well, you got your wish in getting rid of Rantanen. 4 out of 5 people on this panel love the fact that he's not there. Or maybe Gil not, because he's going to the East Coast now. So maybe
he's in my division now. So
yeah, that's true.
A lot.
So, we got rid of a great guy. We got to bring one back in. So
I think y'all are fine. You could just sit there. Y'all are fine.
Hey, Barry Trotz is going to not be dull between now and the trade deadline. I guarantee he will be in the mix. But guys, ladies, we are out of time. I want to thank everybody for joining us and everybody for tuning in. We are here every week doing the Locked On NHL Squad Show and having a great time talking a little hockey. Thank everybody for tuning in, and we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Gil Martin. Thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL Squad Show.